Hey everyone. So I made a couple videos and people are wondering, yeah, we understand putting money into your 401k and your Roth, but how would you access it? So today I'm going to go over an article by the Mad Fientist who outlays three different methods, some of the strategies and calculations behind the math. And like I said, that person's name is Mad Fientist, like mad scientist. And then if you paid attention, you would see my YouTube channel is named FI Package. So a lot of times when you make these videos, people want to know a little bit about you. I shared some of that info in the first video, but the purpose of my name is to help you create a financial independence package where if you wanted to retire early, you can. That's why there's no RE in it. It's just called FI package. But we'll get into the article now. So I'll put the link like I usually do in the YouTube comments. If you have any questions, put a question or comment into the YouTube and that'll help me out. And then I'll try to answer your questions. So the first part of this article talks about, yes, you do have to pay a 10% penalty if you withdraw before 59 and a half years old. However, there's a couple methods to avoid that penalty, and then we'll also go into the calculations he and another person made, even if you were to take the 10% withdrawal penalty. Here, this portion here just talks that standard retirement is a part of early retirement. One of the key things he detailed in this paragraph here is some people say they don't want to contribute to their 401k because they're planning on retiring early. But one of the key things you think about is you still need money to live in your 60s and 70s, so you should use the years that you're working to invest in those accounts tax deferred or potentially tax free, which will showcase below. So the first strategy is called the Roth conversion ladder. The Mad Fientist created this visual, but what you do is you contribute to a pre-tax retirement account during your career to reduce your taxes. So when you are working in your career, you're making this much. Hopefully, if you decide to retire early, your income will be down here. What you get when you start withdrawing on that is the tax savings. So if you look at this visual here, you contribute to pre-tax, you retire early, then you transfer that money in your 401k into a traditional IRA. From your traditional IRA, you then convert from your traditional IRA into Roth IRAs. And then you do that every year. And after 5 years of it being in a Roth IRA, you can withdraw the conversion tax and penalty free. But when you do that, this step right here, when you convert from your traditional to your Roth, you will have to pay taxes. When you have put that in your 401k, if you put it in a traditional 401k, you didn't have to pay any taxes. It was shielded from taxes. But if you were not even to retire early and you waited till 70 or 67, whatever, you would always have to pay the government that money. But where you win is when you're in your working years, you have a high tax rate versus when you retire, you hopefully have a lower tax rate. So, so this is what that article or this visual said here. And what you do is during those first 5 years, you need to figure out how much you'll need in like the fifth year. So you start in the first year. By the sixth year, that money you should be able to withdraw. However, However, that's only on your earnings. Your contributions, if you were to put in a Roth separately, those contributions were already taxed, so you wouldn't have to pay taxes on that amount. Some of the pros and cons. So with this method, what you can do is you can control how much you convert each year, and you can control how much taxes you're going to pay. If your income's low enough, you get to potentially execute tax-free conversions. That's another pro to it. So you may not even have to pay taxes on that money depending on your family size and how much you convert. Then, if you don't need that money, you can let those conversions grow tax-free until you do need them. The issue is you have to wait 5 years after executing the conversion to withdraw money without a penalty, and then you pay taxes on the conversion 5 years before you can use it. So, like I said, each year you do it. You do it year one, year six, you can touch it. Year two, year seven, you can touch it. And that's why it's called a conversion ladder. The next method is called 72T, substantial equal periodic payments. It's called 72T because that's where it is in the tax code. Tax code 72T explains this situation. Tax code 401k, your 401k plan, explains the 401k plan. So this method here is similar. When you leave your work plan 401k, you roll into a traditional IRA. And then you determine how much you want to draw from your retirement accounts every year until you turn 59 and a half. With the SEPP, the 72T, you have to do it from the day you start all the way to 59 and a half. So there's three methods in the IRS document. You pick the one that's closest to the number you decide. It's basically three different calculations the IRS uses. This is just a high-level overview. But then you want to confirm with a tax professional to ensure your step 3 is correct. And then you have to withdraw and pay tax on that amount every year, depending on the method you use to calculate. And if you find that you need to withdraw more money or you don't need to withdraw as much, you can change the IRS method you use to calculate draws only once. So you got to make sure. And then you continue making the withdrawals for 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer. Usually if you're retiring early, it's probably going to be over 5 years unless, you decided to do it at 52 and a, 50, 54 and a half. So here's another visual. Basically says the same thing I went over. There's three methods, the RMD, the fixed amortization, and the fixed annuity method. Then you would withdraw that amount, 5 years or 59 and a half. Some of the pros and cons for this is the withdrawals the same year. This one, another good withdrawal advantage is you can withdraw immediately after retirement. So if you don't have a lot of money in your taxable accounts to hold you over, you can start tapping into your retirement right away. And like I said, you get to choose how much you want to withdraw from. Some of the cons is the 72T distributions usually require help from a tax professional setup. You have to continue the withdrawals until a standard age, whether you need the money or not. You must continue the withdrawals whether it makes sense to or not to, which means you could be forced to sell when the markets are down. The first method you could control. Let's say year 3, you only want to do half the amount you did in year 2. You could do that. This is a specific method and a specific amount each year. If you stop withdrawals or withdraw the incorrect amount, then you're going to be paying a lot of penalties. That's why it's recommended to work with a tax professional. The third method to take away to withdraw from your 401k is just to pay the 10% penalty. You can take the money out of your account. And later on, we're going to go over some other details, but there was one of this Radical Personal Finance podcast listeners suggested that even if you pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty, it still makes sense to contribute to a tax advantage account over an ordinary taxable account. That means like a 401k or a traditional IRA. So down below, we'll go over to some of the calculations, but some of the pros, you don't have to plan. You can take the money immediately. The cons is you have to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty. There are ways that you can take it away without paying a 10% withdrawal penalty, and that's if you become disabled or use the money to pay for an educational expense or a first-time home purchases. There's limits to it. But if you're reading this article or listening to this video, what he says is it's not really useful if you're doing early retirement. And then you can fund some medical expenses out of your IRA if the expenses exceed 10% of your gross income. So here's the assumptions and calculations. Basically, he puts the scenarios in, but we'll get to the meat and potatoes of it. So these three scenarios, they said they just did a taxable account, which is like your normal brokerage account or anything that's not tax deferred. It's just into like an investment account. That's step one. They did it. They assumed it'll grow 15%. They did 18,000 a year, and at 45, she withdraws 9,000 a year. These are just scenarios he's putting in to compare between the three options that we went over. Step two, so traditional, you contribute 18,000 a year in your 401k each year. 18,000 is fully invested since it's not taxed. It's pre-tax money. The scenario one, if she put 18,000 a year, she really only got, or she wanted to put 18,000 a year, she only could put 13,500 because you get taxed on it before or after. This is money after your paycheck or when you get your paycheck. It's your net income. Step three, basically it's same as step one because it's a Roth. You have to pay taxes first, then you put in the Roth. So here's the graph, and it shows the different scenarios on how it played out over many years. So this is the calculation we talked about. So after step one, if you started and you didn't put any in your 401k, after the end of the scenario, you'd have 177,000. If you do step two, where you put in traditional 401k, you would have ended up with 248,000. And then step three, you would have ended up with 186,000. So what happens if you do the Roth conversion ladder and you do the 5-year waiting period? So after 5 years, this is the amount you would have. After 5 years, after you retired, or you ended the scenario, you would have 248,000 step one or scenario one. Step two, traditional, where you have the penalty. Step two, when you do the 72T SEPP, you would have 348. And then step three, the Roth IRA conversion ladder, you would have 339. And then scenario three, you would have 261. So basically what he's saying here is the Roth conversion ladder 2C is slightly less than the other traditional scenarios. Yep. That's because when you convert the money from the traditional IRA to the Roth IRA, taxes are paid on the conversion, which I talked about earlier. So some of the money and earning potential is lost to the government every year. So he says once our fearless scenario person, he called it a Fientist, turns 60 years old, she would have contributed exactly the same amount of pre-tax money and withdrawal money, the same amount each year in each one of these scenarios. The only difference is the type of account she's contributed to, and that's the only factor affecting her balances at 60. So here's the totals. Scenario 1, 469. Scenario 2, 672. Scenario 2B, the SEPP, 706. Scenario 2C, the Roth IRA conversion ladder. He calls it traditional ladder, 691. And if you were just to do Roth, that'd be 504. So that's a huge range of values. However, some of the money in the accounts is a little bit different because $1 in a Roth is more valuable than $1 in a traditional because you don't have to pay taxes. So he did want to highlight that, but still, you can see the vast difference in account values. And like you said, it's hard to see a clear winner, but if you look at it, you can see the differences. So then what he wanted to do was he made another assumption. Now let's assume the standard age retiree wants additional 45,000 use every year. She's going to fund it by withdrawing from these accounts. She's not worried about when the money runs out. She's got other money, but she wants to see how long would each of these accounts last. So scenario 1, if you just did taxable no 401k, it will last till you're 76. 2A, the traditional 401k and you pay a penalty, 86. 2B, when you do this IRS method 72T, it will last till 90. And then surprisingly, the traditional Roth IRA ladder, 90, and then just a regular Roth, 79. So basically, by contributing to a 401k and doing Roth conversion ladders, you could have almost 15 extra years of elevated income when compared simply to a tax account. So 90, 76, almost 15. So some conclusions. He says if you don't want to mess with things like Roth conversion ladder or SEPP distributions, still makes sense to do it in pre-tax retirement account. Then you just pay the early withdrawal penalty. In the penalty scenario, you still have 200,000 more than just a regular tax account. Basically meaning use the tax advantages and deductions to your advantage. If you think about what the government does in 2025, I believe the IRS limit for 401k, if you're under 50, is 23,500 pre-tax or Roth. So that means the government only lets you put 23,500. If you ever think about why would the government only let you put in, they limit you on how much you can put in, it's more advantage for the government to not let you put in as much. So you should, basically what this saying is, you should take advantage of those opportunities. Same with the Roth. And then he just talks about his plan, what he's doing, and I'll share this information in the link. But that's some information for some questions some people had, and I just wanted to share it with you all. Hit the like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have a question, and I'll try to answer in the next video.